This episode of Super Pulp Science is brought to you by Witch Knight versus the Corpse of the Ancient God, a story print set in the Shared World universe with art by GMB Kamichuk and text by Chadwick Ginther.
Attention, citizens! It's time for Super Pulp Science!
This is Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how genre gets made. I'm GMB Kamichuk. I'm here with my long-suffering co-host, Justin Curry, who is known the world over as Chasing Artwork, and new studio regular, Chadwick Ginther.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for letting us turn the recording device on today. In the interest of full disclosure, dear listener, Chadwick has been using the studio as an area of refuge for the last little while. Why don't you, for those of you who don't know who Chadwick is, he is a writer of urban and dark fantasies. He is a collaborator on our Shared World, Sinister Stories of Swords and Sorcery. And so why don't you tell us why you have been darkening our doorsteps this so many times?
Largely because I want to get work done. And I thought being around other creative people who are also in a working studio would give me a little extra gumption in the summer months. Last summer, I tried taking Fridays off to devote just to writing, and I found that after accomplishing the smallest single task, I was ready to roll into the weekend. And recently, I read an article, and I can't remember the provenance of it, but it suggested that taking a Wednesday off was better than taking a Monday or a Friday, because you spend less time away from your natural routine. You do 2 days of work, day off, 2 days of work, weekend.
Oh, interesting.
Gregory,
So,
you did something like that where you reversed your week, so you ended your week on Wednesdays.
Yeah, my Wednesday is the beginning of my week.
Right.
Yeah, the way that my work flow and how I keep my writing schedule. So like this is why when people are here and I'm really chill on a Wednesday and it's like not a big disruption to have lots of folks around, it's because to me I'm just building momentum into my week, and it's much easier to be a pleasant host and like have people around, and like I don't feel like you're interrupting me mid-flow. So that's part of that. So those things just sort of aligned.
I asked the folks at the studio if they'd be willing to let me squat here on Wednesdays, and they were amenable, so I'm happy to be here.
Half of us said yes, half of us said absolutely not.
That's right. And
has it worked?
Yeah.
You feel like
it absolutely has worked.
let me frame it this way. I can hear somebody right now who is listening. It's you, dear listener. It's you who is saying, how can you go do writing in a studio where people are talking and doing stuff, and you know them, you can't ignore them. It's different in a coffee shop maybe, or in a restaurant where you don't really know anyone, so it's fine to leave you alone. Tell us about the process. How do you use this time where we're all chatting with each other to still get writing done?
Well, I mean, it's not that I ignore people, but I've been to writing retreats before where everybody just kind of, collects in a space and works. And we all know each other. I was at a weekend cabin retreat with Gregory and some other local creators a number of years ago.
When that was.
I believe the mug says 2015 or 2016.
2015?
I think it was 2016.
Yeah. Now there was the one that I did with you and AP Fuchs and a few others, and then we did another one at my place after that. So that first one, what I remember, dear listener, is that I decided to do an experiment where I didn't bring my laptop and I did everything longhand for the writing retreat, just to like really get present. And that also I figured that way I don't have to sit around and plug. I can go wherever I want. But I remember watching Chadwick working and thinking, oh, that's how a writer works. Like you were so dedicated to the revision and the writing and the revision and the writing, and then you'd push away, stand up, and now you were sort of available. But then you exuded such a great don't talk to me, I'm working vibe without seeming angry that I was like, okay, whatever that zen. In samurai movies, there's often that notion where the great master can exude a force that he cannot be defeated, and so people won't even draw their sword. That was the kind of vibes at the writing retreat that I was getting from Chadwick. So,
Yeah, well, I mean, some of that maybe comes from years of me trying to get writing done on the bus on my way to work, or on my coffee breaks, or on my lunch break, and just like in those moments, I do not want to be interrupted, absolutely, by strangers, and so you cultivate that face,
right.
and maybe that that kind of lingers. But despite people being around and knowing them and enjoying their company, I haven't felt pressure to join in or not join in. Like,
Right.
if I feel like chiming in, I do.
And I think this is really important to like recognize where it works for you to be productive, and recognize where like you're putting yourself in situations where you're not being productive. And I think like a lot of people like fantasize about how great it would be to be surrounded by other creative people working, but some people just can't get stuff done in that environment, right? They're too distracted by the conversations and like what everybody else is doing, and it's just not productive. They work better when they're alone, and vice versa. And I'm still like to this day like fine tuning and like analyzing, like, was I more productive last week? Am I more productive this week? What's changed? What's different? What
what's-
like
Yeah, what is the essential thing?
Yeah.
Like for me, Wednesdays. So part of the week structure is that because we travel often on the weekends, I don't want to get into the mental habit that like the weekend is for relaxing, when half the weekends of the year really are the busiest times that
it's
I
kind
will
of
ever have.
tainted our weekends. I don't know
Right.
if it has for you, but yeah.
Yeah.
A weekend is like when I get things done.
It's time to do
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So this is part of that structure. But what that means for me on Wednesdays is I cannot do first draft work in the studio on a Wednesday. Like on a Friday, I've got the momentum to start up some first draft, but I have to bring revision work or continuation work or stuff where the momentum already exists. Like I pick up where last week, quote unquote, which is like Monday, Tuesday, was somewhere in the last part of the week where I already accomplished something, and then I start working on that.
That right there, I think that's a really good pro tip, is to set up some easy wins for yourself. Not every day you're going to be like infused with the muse and ready to create something new and be creative 100% of the time. Having a bunch of stuff kind of like started where it's just like for my work, it's to kind of have that base drawing all done, and then so it's just basically like tracing it in vector, like it's grunt work. I can turn my brain off and can just do that, and I find that's a great way to kind of start my day or end my day when I don't want to be thinking about like the big picture or other work. It's setting up those easy wins when you feel like you can get some work done, but you really don't want to come up with that brand new thing. Or
I've heard a couple of traditional comics artists say that their favorite way to start a day is to ink yesterday's page. Like they leave a page from yesterday
Perfect, yeah.
that they drew, and then they'll ink it as their warm-up, which reminds them all their lines. It gets all their muscle memory back together, and then they start drawing the new page.
Yeah, I think Lawrence Block actually had advice like that in his, I think it's called Telling Lies for Fun and Profit, one of his writing guides.
it's great.
The crime writer that I'm more familiar with by name than their actual work, but I did check out the writing guide when I was getting started, and he allowed himself, I believe, to review the last 5 pages he'd written the day before, and then would start in on the new writing. And that, it's not necessarily what I do, but it's
Finding
certainly
some momentum.
a way to warm yourself up.
Now with prose, if I'm working hard on a prose project and it's first draft or first second, so like you're still finding the story in yourself before you're polishing it, I cannot read what I wrote the day before. I have to just pick up on the idea that I had, try to remember it, and so I find that polishing comes later. But I just have to, if I start rereading, I start revising, and then I fall into the
then
revising.
you lose that
habit.
forward momentum.
Yeah,
you
that's
get
right.
caught up in
Yeah.
past.
I have too much what ifs.
It's a trick. Get an axe.
I can do a reread after I get a page, so I try to get 1,000 words out that are fresh, and then I go, okay, now I have something new today. If I want to tinker and I spend the rest of my writing time today tinkering, that's fine because I at least moved the goalpost.
Yep.
And sometimes I go, oh, I don't want to tinker. There's too much tinkering. That's too much real work. I'm going to just write some more. Or other times it's like, oh, yeah, if I change these 5 things, this will mean that I don't have to ever come back to this section. Like, it's done in my mind. I don't have a way in the manuscript to delineate like what I consider to be finished, but in my own brain I can break up with things.
Yeah, I typically like to keep forward momentum. If I think of something shiny and new as I'm going forward that changes what I remember having written, I just go back and I make a note to myself, adjust this because adjust X because of Y, and keep moving forward.
So let's pause that, because I do a different, the same, I think accomplishing the same goal, but I do it differently. When you say I go back and make the note, you literally scroll in through the manuscript and find the place.
That should be changed.
Yeah. How are you making that notation?
I usually make it just in all caps.
Make
so
this
that
more
because, Gregory will have noticed that I work a lot on hard copy when I'm doing revisions. So if I do something in all caps or if I do something in bold, I'm not going to miss it when I'm going through. I know some people just use like square brackets, or they have whatever notation works for them, and then they search it.
See, I find it impossible to find the thing. I'll be like, oh, when so-and-so says such and such, I should mention that they do whatever. If I stop to find that place, even if I'm using the find function, it breaks me up. So I just scroll to the bottom of the document and put my note in there. So my drafts fill up with these at the bottom. At the very last page of the document is all these notes for revision ideas, and then it becomes almost like a checklist.
And then, I don't need that anymore. I solved that. Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I should do that.
The bottom of the document is where I put things that I want to do but haven't figured out how to do yet.
Yeah.
And the top of the document is where I put things that I want to change, because I'm going to probably read through it linearly.
Right.
So I'll see that note saying, cut this character or adjust this moment. And then as I read through, I can just make that change.
I wanted to ask you guys about medium transitions. What I mean by this is, when I'm thinking about storytelling, I have script, I have storyboarding, and then I have final art. And I find, especially with the script and storyboarding, going back and forth really helps me clean things up, make things more concise, and I see my mistakes when when I'm actually drawing it out and paneling it out. Okay, this doesn't work, this doesn't flow right. Or I solve problems when I'm going back and forth. And so you guys have been talking about actually writing it out and going digital, and then you print it out. I see Chadwick in front of you, you got the printed out document, and every time you see the story in like those different mediums, it's like seeing it with fresh eyes, and you see it a little bit differently.
Oh, like changing it so that you physically are holding
the
it. The
medium is transition.
So when I first started, I have so many printed drafts of the first Imagination Manifesto, 100, 200 pages printed out of illustration where I'm making notes on it, and then I change it, and then I revise it, and then I printed it again, and that change in medium was really important for me when I was starting.
And then you're going to make it into a big paper mache
I'm going to have
Cthulhu
to do something.
monster.
I'm less nervous about keeping drafts in digital spaces than I used to be. There was sort of a thing where it wasn't real enough to me if I didn't hold it, and once I held it, exactly what you're saying, once I held it, it felt closer to the experience the reader might have, and then my notes would be more, I thought, accurate or more present or more capable. Now I know that the print process, because so many of our graphic novels, not all of them, but so many of them we are doing in-house in the studio, that there is a place where that's the time you're going to receive a draft from, like a proof from the printer. And so now I try to hold off until I get that proof from the printer, with graphic novels anyway, for a final look through. And I do the rest of my stuff in shitty storyboards, like you were saying, in my notebooks. And I kind of just flip between what is left on the screen and what is in the notebook when I'm doing graphic novels. And it doesn't have the same power, for me anyway, that switching of mediums that it used to be. I used to be almost superstitious about it. And now I'm a little more comfortable with like, I trust myself more, I think.
Right. I see it more as like it's like when you're painting, you're supposed to, like, 2 tricks are turning your painting into grayscale to see like if the contrast is there, and then flipping, like mirroring your image. I put it into that same category. It's a way to kind of trick your brain into seeing the thing for the
Dear
first
listener,
time.
don't
again.
do this unless you're feeling particularly confident that day. Because your work always looks horrifically bad when you do those value adjustments. You're like, oh yeah, I'm bad at this. And then you flip the composition. You're like, oh yeah, it's completely unbalanced. Be ready. Be ready. You will always find something bad there. I thought when I asked the question about how you got work done here, you were going to say, I'm mostly doing revisions because of the longhand stuff.
Well, that is true. I haven't done a lot. That's just sort of where I have been in my schedule, and things that have popped up that I've been doing revisions, and a lot of it has been not story structure related revisions, but final draft, cutting words to hit a word count goal, or polishing, where I can kind of look at the text a page at a time, do a page, and pop back into the conversation.
Right.
Ooh, that's
So it's a lot of
tough.
micro focus.
Yeah.
I always feel so rushed. Like I want that finish line is so close. It's hard to actually.
But I like that when for instance, the story that I just submitted, I had a completed story at 7,000 words. I wanted to get it closer to 5,000 words. And one of the things that I do when I'm trying to do that deep of a revision,
That's a big cut.
is I have this many manuscript pages. That means I have to cut this many words per page. And I look at each page as its own thing. And I by that time,
That terrifies me.
I've read the story enough times that I know in general if something is out of place at that micro level, and I can go, I say this somewhere else,
Right.
and I'll look for it. Yeah, I say it here. I like the way I say it better here. I can cut this line. I can cut this sentence. Sometimes it's like I can cut this paragraph because it's just filler
Yeah.
on this page.
You solve that problem elsewhere.
And you don't always get like if you say like for the story I was writing, I kind of was aiming for 80 words per manuscript page to cut, and I didn't always get there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I got 30, sometimes I got 60, sometimes I got 100, sometimes I got 110.
Yeah.
That doesn't usually get me to my goal, but then I also I jokingly call it the machine, which maybe I shouldn't joke about in the AI times, but I have a list of words and phrases that I know are filler for me that just clutter up a sentence.
Oh, sure.
That you just overuse that and up and down, even like you can just say he sat, and like that sat implies down.
Yeah.
Right. So you can usually go through the
Words that
manuscript and cut
assume
those.
other meanings, right?
Yeah. And so I just do a find on this long list of words, and I go through and I look at them each individually. And then I will also find ways to rephrase things to tighten it up when I'm looking at the story out of context.
Okay.
So I can almost always cut 5 to 10% of a manuscript without losing any story.
Number one, we've had lots of conversations before, and for years. I wish you had told me this like 5 years ago. This would really have helped me. I feel like this trick of per page, a little bit per page, it seems so obvious, and yet for me, it was completely outside of my practice. What I will do when I have to cut 2,000 words is I will think of what the essential elements of a story are. You know, you have your character and they're after something, and what are the things they were after, and what were those complications? Can I cut an entire set of complications out? And then I'll start at the beginning of the draft and I'll just scrub out an entire timeline of stuff and hope that it's enough to rid me of my word count problem. And I just pick my least favorite plot element and just eradicate it.
And I usually do that at the assembly phase. A lot of my short stories anyway, I kind of build up like a mosaic where I've got a bunch of elements that I think will fit the theme or I think will fit the story. I usually start with something I've already written because when I'm writing short stories, they're often for an anthology open call. So if this anthology has a water theme, I'll kind of look through I've got a like 200-page document of just snippets that I've scribbled in my notebook over the years. And I'll go through that looking for anything that might fit the theme. And then I kind of put those, I'm like, oh, maybe this here, maybe this there. And I go through several assembly drafts where I write connective tissue to get this scene to this scene, or write new scenes that I think will work, or, you know, kind of go casting for the character that I want to tell it.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
What it feels to me like is this must have developed because, dear listener, Chadwick writes and has published a number of short stories. And the short story as a medium is very different than the novel as a medium, and it requires an economy where the editor will say, you know, it's perfect if you cut this exact number of words away. You know, is that where that practice came from, or is it different?
Some of it. I actually started that practice with a novel, that word cutting process, because I was submitting to, I think it was Angry Robot at the time, had an open call for novels, unagented submissions, and it was but they would only accept up to, I think it was 120,000 words. They weren't taking any submissions longer than that. And I had, the first novel I had ever completed was 135,000 words.
Gotcha.
And I'm like, I need to cut 15,000 words. And it felt impossible. And that's when I was like, okay, well, you've got this many manuscript pages. That equals this many words per page.
Right.
And that's where, and I got it down. And I've kind of used it on every manuscript since then. Like Too Far Gone, the final novel in the Thunder Road trilogy, my final draft, I think that I submitted to my publisher, came in at 125.
Right.
But the first book was 95 and the second book was 105. So they were like, we really want this. It can be longer, but we really want this in the ballpark of the other two books.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to, I think I got it down under 115, but I had to cut, 10, 15,000 words.
I feel like there's a piece in here where we should talk about the difference between comic book pages, where the scripts can be very light and almost breezy, but the effort of adding, for example, if you want to add a page to a graphic novel, it will take, if I'm thinking about a project working on with Scott Henderson right now, adding a page means 8 to 15 hours of labor, right? Paid labor for that artist. And so it can, if you are paying, from very low to very high rates, that can be anywhere from $150 a page to $1,000 a page that you're paying to add a page to a graphic novel because of the art component. But if you need to add a page to a novel, it's 350 words, give or take, and you are, that's how much work.
Yeah, depending on how motivated I am, that could be less than 10 minutes.
That's
if I'm in a groove, that's like one page is nothing.
Yeah,
and it would, for the economy of it, it would be much more expensive for me to cut a page because it takes longer.
Yeah, it takes longer, right? And so it's not. We switch channels often in the studio between graphic novel writing and prose writing, and it's not a one-to-one where you're saying, "Oh well." If you're a longtime listener of the show, we often talk about graphic novels in the economy of a certain number of pages that are useful to have divisible by 4. It's good for printing. It's all of these other elements that are really important in your graphic novel page count. But if your novel runs over, an extra 15, 30 pages, your publisher is usually not that concerned with a small overage. It's when it's 25% longer than you thought it might be. That's usually when the problem arises.
I have had them suggest at one point that they wanted to add something, or they wanted me to cut slightly because we were just over that next packet of pages.
Right.
And I think this was before the 4-page. I think it was 8s.
Yeah.
At the time, and so they're like, we need to either add 7 pages of material or cut a page.
Right.
Take your pick.
Yeah.
And I added 7 pages.
Nice. Yeah. Perfect.
Well, and you'll see in graphic novel publishing, a lot of graphic novels have back matter. Mm-hmm. That actually came up out of filling the overage in the division.
Love back matter.
Right? I love back matter.
We all love back matter.
Yeah.
So it all worked out.
I probably wouldn't have been able to write my first comic script if people weren't putting their scripts in the back.
Yeah.
Like it took me forever. The first comic story I published was in Donovan Yashik's Space Pig Hamadeus series, and I think it was a 6-page comic. It took me over a year to figure out how to script it and how to tell a story in that length.
Yeah.
Just from looking at other people's scripts and trying to figure out and comics are, I love them, but they're terrible for this because the scripts are so idiosyncratic. Everybody does it differently.
Because your script ultimately at its best is a letter to the illustrator.
Yeah.
And that is a personal letter to that illustrator that they know.
Okay, but to that point, I don't know about you guys, but I find every single book project I do follows a bit of a different formula of how it gets done.
Yeah.
From the beginning to the planning to the the work to the finishing. Like every single one, I'm on book number 13. I'm making my 13th book now, and still like I don't have a set process. It's always kind of Mobius.
It might be apocryphal. I can't remember who said this, but I remember seeing it somewhere, in the wilds of the internet, and it was like, you never learn how to write a book, and you never learn how to write a story. You learned how to write that book, and you learned how to write that story.
That's
And every time you start over again, it's a new project. It has new variables.
When I was working with Rick Chafe on Red Earth, he's a Governor General Award-winning playwright, and he's coming in to help us put a play. And so, in my mind, he's got all the answers.
He's got the 10-step
we're just
process.
going to follow Rick's plan.
Step 1.
And I was like, okay, Rick, well, how's this going to work? He goes, well, have you written this before? And it's exactly to your point. I was like, no. He's like, me either. We got to make it all up together. And I was like, well, isn't there a system that works? He's like, of course not. I was
then
like,
everybody would do it.
Yeah, then everyone would do it. And he's like, we just have to explore it. And particularly in theater, him and Christian were really great at saying, as soon as the actor presents it, you'll know if you care or you don't. And that's why the workshopping process is so important. We can't just write in a room for theater. You have to write and hear it and write and hear it. And that was really instructive for me. But just for him being like, no, it's fine. We're just going to figure it out.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I thought we would follow your lead. He's like, no, don't do that. Right? It's like, I'm here to follow your lead. Isn't this like your plot and your idea? It's like, yeah, but I need your experience. So I think you just all...
Yeah. No, and I mean, like one of the last steps that I take if I have time before the deadline is to read my entire story aloud before I submit it, because then I will catch those things that a human being wouldn't say. I'll find the typos that my brain glossed over because my mind knows what I meant to say.
Do you read it out loud?
I read it out loud. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a robot do it.
Yeah, and you have a robot do it.
So what I'll do is...
Because I'll go searching for the inflection that I would use if I were to read it at a book launch.
Oh, sure.
Right.
And so then I'm like, oh, maybe I should italicize this.
Klaatu! Veranda!
Because I really like old public domain stories, and there's not a lot of big houses who are doing dramatic productions of those things, I'll listen to AudioVox recordings of old pulps and things like that. What this means, dear listener, is that it is not professionals. It's just regular people reading the story, sometimes too fast, sometimes too slow.
DARPA approved.
Yeah,
voice
there's
actors,
no
actresses,
voice actors involved. They're just people doing their best. So I have a pretty good facility to hear the story for what it is and not how it's presented. And when I found that there were some settings on my laptop that let them read the manuscript to me, I realized that what I could do is I could finish a novel, or as I could be ready to break up with the novel and say, okay, I think I'm done, it's finished. And then I could put it on and I could work on, I often listen to audiobooks and things like that while I'm storyboarding a new project. And I'm just letting my pen do its work, and I'm listening to another story, and I'm just kind of absorbing. And I found that if I put on my own work that way, even though it was pretty stilted because it's just a robot reading the word, one word at a time, I would catch the filler words. The filler words would just be like a tattoo, like just a hammer tapping away.
But would you be able to edit it like you're on a walk when you're doing this? Or are you able to actually make that change on the fly when you hear it?
I don't make the change on the fly.
No, don't they just stack up then?
They stack up in
Yeah.
my mind, and that's how I know they have to go. And so, like, the same way that I get annoyed at certain writers, the same way I get annoyed at certain writers from the past that have a colloquial way of writing that is no longer sort of
In fashion.
yeah, that's exactly it. It's not in fashion anymore, and so it builds up as a bit of a bugbear for me. I'll hear that in my own writing, like, oh yeah, you repeated that. Oh, there's that phrase again. Oh, that's a Gregoryism. Okay, let's try to cut that. That's when it comes up, and that's only been recent for me. The idea that I should explore looking at what of my own works is filler. This is why I'm saying I wish I had talked to you about this specific thing 5 years ago. I think I'd have a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, reading it aloud is great for finding those moments of repetition where you use the same word too close together. Or I just noticed in the manuscript I'm editing today that my protagonist is like a roguish type fellow, and he's sliding around the setting way too often.
Sliding.
It's like he slid through the crowd. He
Right.
slid into the alcove, and I'm just like, okay,
Right.
like that's.
Right.
Like,
You're
and
going to rename him Oily John.
Yeah, it's like I noticed it on page 24 of the manuscript, and like I went back to page 1, and I'm like, look for sliding.
Yeah.
But it's fantastic for that. I like reading it myself because then in the moment I can make those changes, because usually it's the last thing I do before I submit, and so often I'm doing this on the morning that the story is due, and so I don't have time to have a robot read it to me and then go back and try to find it.
Right. So, a word like sliding. What is something in illustration that you find, Justin, that it's a go-to trick that when you're looking back through your storyboards or looking back through your graphic novel page composition, potato, that you realize, oh, I'm doing that again. Maybe I should vary it. Maybe I should.
I'm a really big fan of kind of the 2D straight on, almost like side scroller video game type composition, where you get like this nice wide shot. You see your character small. You see like lots of layers of background. So there's like foreground, then your character's midground, and then there's several layers of backgrounds. You get this like big. Yeah, it's just kind of a nice straight-on layout, and I really like those. And I think I probably use those too much. But again, like then, how much of that is style, and how much of that is overuse, and is this something that I'm just noticing? Does anybody else notice this?
And it shows up in prose, like you think of Jane Eyre as the one that really struck me. Like, oh, I'm 15 pages in. I'm a young reader, and I'm reading Jane Eyre, and it's probably assigned to me at school, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, I think we're 30 pages in and we're still just describing the room, like nothing has happened. Yeah. But in an illustration, that huge illustration of the room or the setting still only takes a second to take in.
Yeah.
Like you just absorb it all. So
As illustrators, do you find that you have poses or panel construction that you just kind of naturally lean into? And then when you're looking at the assembled graphic novel, you go back and it's like, oh man, like I'm doing this. I always show this guy in this type of profile, or like how are you keen on revising those illustrations or finding a different way to present when you notice you overused a panel construction?
Stuff like when you do a 2-page spread, you usually like to follow it up by like a 9-panel grid or something, right?
Yeah.
Like once you have like one big sweeping image, then we need to slow it down and go like step by step of the aftermath. You don't want to have a 2-page spread and then another 2-page spread, right?
Correct.
Stuff like that.
It depends. The story will beg for it a certain way. But one of the things we were doing in Eye Collector that I found specifically to your point that I was doing in Eye Collector is that if we had a big splash, an emotional splash, I felt compelled to compress, make an 8-panel or 12-panel set of pages that just like almost...
the characters need to sit in it for a little bit.
Yeah, well, but it was almost... I feel pretty self-indulgent when I do big, colorful, emotional, splash, weird stuff, or if it's like a watercolor wash background, something sort of peculiar. Eye Collector is full of peculiar stuff. Mm-hmm. So if I felt like I had done a lot of self-indulgent illustration, then I would feel compelled to roll up my sleeves a little bit more and try something hard for a couple of pages. It's very easy for me to make something weird and big and fill the 2 pages. It's much more difficult for me to have a series of talking heads, talking back and forth together. So those panels that I normally avoid, because in the Eye Collector I had so much freedom, I found myself curtailing my own habits. It's like, okay, well, I had sort of 3 easy pages. I'm going to do 3 really hard pages. And it lent itself in that specific project to trying things that I had never done in comics before. And it invented a power that the character had, which we used at the end of the series, which came up specifically because I was just trying to do hard compositions. And I have the character reaching between panels. There's this cosmic entity, and it has powers beyond space and time. And so he would reach from one panel to another and affect things in a panel in a different place in time. And I did it a couple of times just kind of for fun. Like, oh, it's just like a little throwaway thing. I'm going to try this. And then Jonathan was like, ooh, this. Can he do this? Is this a power? Like, how are we going to use this in the story? Like, he can't. It was sort of a Chekhov's gun. Like, once it had happened, we couldn't just not do it again. We had to, if we are
work it into the script now.
We had to work it in. So it actually, in avoiding a repeated set of habits, I created a different thing that then I was forced to repeat. So
that's also a fun kind of side effect and benefit of a collaboration versus a work for hire project,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, absolutely true.
The opposite of that, I noticed in my last graphic novel, Dragon Nanny, I would have a couple like asset folders where I'd have lots of rocks, lots of clouds, lots of tufts of grass and foliage and stuff like that. And I would catch myself getting like near the end of the project and trying, I'd be spending all this time making more new clouds and more new rocks rather than recycling the ones that I'd already used.
And just
even though,
point of clarity, explain how the vector system allows you to have a big pile of rocks and clouds and grass.
Right. Unlike Photoshop and other programs, when you build a background and everything's kind of baked in together, in Vector, you can isolate just that tree. I'm going to grab that out of there. Just that rock and grab that out of there. And then you can manipulate just that one item. So once I get it's almost like Lego. Once I get a bunch of pieces, then I can reuse them throughout the story, and this creates some consistency in the artwork, and I don't have to draw quite as much. But I felt like almost like I was cheating a little bit because I was using a lot of the same assets, but it's a 100+ page graphic novel, and I kept making new assets that I really didn't need to be making. I could use the ones I had already, but I felt like I needed to. This needs new clouds. I can't use the clouds I used.
A real artist would draw it again. Yeah.
But really, again, we're talking about like one of 9 panels on a page that somebody's going to glance at for a minute. You don't maybe need to spend the morning making up this new environment components that you already have earlier in the book. So kind of the opposite of that, where you need to go easy on yourself a little bit too, and when you can recycle some of your own work or past efforts, it's not a terrible thing, as long as it's not obvious.
Yeah, I think so. With Midnight City, I was really obsessed with, and you, dear listener, you can just Google this. Wally Wood's, that too. But Wally Wood's 22 panels that always work.
Perfect, yeah.
And this is essentially a really easy value grid work for character 2 shots. How to place 2 characters in a panel and vary it regularly, even if the action isn't being varied. So that you have a visual action, a camera move rather than a character move. And what that meant for me when we're talking about recycling is if I had a character, and you can spot it now, here's the punchline if you pick up that book and look at it. If I have a character looking straight on camera and he's looking straight out of the panel, his silhouette would be identical if you were looking at him from behind and he was perfectly in silhouette. So I could take a front-facing illustration of that character and then now put the value all to black and flip him around so that now the brim of his hat is pointed the right way and put him just off the edge of the panel without having to redraw them for the 2-shot. And so once you know that, you'll see it everywhere in that work, and you're like, wait, you cheating bugger.
Okay, then. That's it.
I was caught up in, there was a deadline issue, and in that project in particular, it went from being one graphic novel to, I think, how did this work? Infinitum had come out, and the sales on Infinitum were strong enough that Midnight City, when I said, I think I could make it 2, I got the note.
Why not 3?
Why not 3?
Why not
And so it went from doing 120 pages to 100 pages each one. And so suddenly there was an impetus to, I'll make that a 2-shot, and I'll do the flip trick here, and that'll be enough to get the story going, and then I just have to focus on the new character or the new element rather than where they are.
We were just talking about this in the last podcast, like old school Spider-Man and Rocket Robin Hood, the reusing of those same sequences over and over again. And as kids, like, I think eventually you caught on, but it took a while, right? Like the stories were still great.
You watched an episode once a week,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so.
It didn't seem like it was
every other cartoon available in between.
So if you were binging it, you'd probably be angry, but since you're not, I have a complete set of Rocket Robin Hood on DVD. It holds up. What a great set. What a great set. Yeah, Trillium, that was your masterwork. And for those of you not familiar, these were kind of like the old Hanna-Barbera cartoons in that the background was constantly being reused, characters were constantly being reused, animations were constantly being drawn over the same animation, same character, same action. They'd rotoscope over a new costume on the same thing you saw last episode.
Do you guys ever do that in writing? Like there was a story a couple, books ago that you described this mountain range really well, and you kind of copy that and paste it and tweak it. Does that ever happen? Because it happens in illustration a lot.
Constantly. Yeah, it's funny. What's the equivalent of that?
I probably have unconsciously where I forgot that I used that, like I pulled it out of my snippets file and plunked it into a new manuscript, and then forgot that I had taken it out.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure
so I use it again in something else. But by the time I go through various drafts of editing, it's not going to be exactly the same.
And that's the same with illustration as well.
The core of it will be there.
Yeah.
But word for word, it won't be the same.
Right.
So in illustration, what's going on is the shape languages match. So if Justin is using elements of we'll just use a tree, because you mentioned that before. If the tree has 20 branches, and he has 5 trees with 20 branches, well, now he can switch each of those trunks and 5 or 6 branches from each tree.
Rotate a couple, and squish a couple, shrink a couple.
And so then the shape language of the background foliage is rich and interesting, and it doesn't feel like a copy. Like your brain won't recognize the pattern as like a stamp. Right? So it's different. But I think constant readers will notice a repeated phrase. And so you couldn't have the exact same description twice. But I do believe that anyone who's really familiar with like my big body of work, I'm sure the phrase snap drawing, like I got obsessed somewhere along the way with people drawing a gun, but it was like a snap draw. I don't even know what that meant. It just had the right kind of phrase. Yeah. And I caught it rereading something of mine before. I'm like, I thought I only used that in this book, but here it is. And then I found it again somewhere else. I'm like, so.
Well, what's the saying? Your style is the mistakes that you can't get rid of.
That's right.
I feel like every author has those things that just become part of their signature style. Like reading, I read tons of Roger Zelazny before I started publishing. And still love his Amber books, but I kept coming across the phrase "neat trick" and I love it. But he used it in numerous stories, and I love it.
Yeah,
like I have to fight to keep myself from saying it.
You're right.
But I found phrases that sort of repeat, and sometimes it's like, well, if it's a saying that this character says. In a novel, you can get away with them saying it more than once. Maybe not as much in a short story, but if I use that character again in another short story, I use that same phrasing because that's a thing that character says. It's not cheating. It's showing the character, right?
Yeah. So to that, one thing that I really like in prose that I read and write is when there is a tangential, but obviously designed repetition of a phrase or an idea to call back to itself throughout the story. So what that means is if a character says something and asserts it as a positive, I'll try to have another character assert it as a negative somewhere along the way. What's happening over here?
Sorry, we're distracted by
What is happening, Lyndon?
the Kelowna foil limited edition print is not on my website, and Lyndon was trying to find it on my website.
Oh, it's not on there.
It doesn't exist.
So, dear listener,
Sorry.
for those of you joining in to the show, Dan Vadeboncoeur is not here, and Lyndon is running the board right now while he is also doing an inventory sort. So, instead of me tapping the table endlessly, you might hear some rustling of plastic. That would be why. But here you are in a working studio. That's it. So repetition of ideas that repeat throughout a story and then are presented in a different context. I love it. So a character will say a phrase and then another character will say that same phrase. They are not connected in the story. They'll never hear each other speak it, but the reader is the connective tissue to be like, aha, okay, I get it. That's what you're doing. I find that in a lot of Stephen King novels. That is definitely a trick that he uses. I don't know if it's a tick or a trope, or if he's even aware of it, but characters will repeat the same phrases in the story in different contexts, and I've always liked that. So that would be kind of an equivalent, I think, to using the same tree in the background, where it doesn't distract. Okay, so all of us have drafts and deadlines and a bunch of different projects all happening at the same time and a bunch of different things pulling at our attention, our time. How are each of you keeping on task? I say, hoping for more crumbs of wisdom.
Well, I have finally crossed the line off on the last task that I actually owe someone this year. So I'm on my own creative recognizance for good or ill for the remainder of the year.
Then maybe just tell me how that felt, because I'm searching for that feeling.
It felt
right
pretty
now.
good.
That's what I
But what I mean, I bounce back and forth between drafts and between projects. I usually have a lot of things going on the pot in various stages of completion. But once I get something to the point of nearing submission, that's the only thing I want to work on. Just because then I can get it out of my brain and out into the world.
Deadlines.
And deadlines.
Yes.
Or, like I had a story that I owed from a Kickstarter anthology launch. I needed to be due kind of by the end of June, so that was what I was
You're
working
way
on
ahead.
for most of June in the studio, and I got that out. I had another story that a publisher had asked for. They'd initially rejected it and then said, if you take a look at ABC, we might consider taking another look at it. So I did those revisions and sent it back in because when I wrote it, I was like, it kind of feels like it belongs to this market. So I was willing to do that revision work on spec rather than just sending it out to the next market. And I'm like, oh, if they end up rejecting it, I still think it might have made it a good story.
One thing
It did end up getting accepted, so that effort paid off.
So one thing I think we take for granted here, you just stepped over it as just regular course of doing business. You received notes that, if you're new to the business, might feel like an attack on the core idea of your creative pursuit. Change these things in your story, and then maybe we'll publish it. That feels like a flex, right? And when you're new to it, it hurts.
That can hurt when you're new to it, and I think it can also get your back up when you're not new to it.
Right.
Yeah.
When it, depending on the market, like it would be very easy for me to go, I've published over 30 stories. Like people want what I got.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that work, but I kind of sat with it. I didn't actually have time to do the work because I had other things that I needed to. I had a very good end of 2023 for short stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I got this request for a rewrite, I had got the revisions for for stories that had already been accepted, and those had deadlines.
Right.
So I needed to get those, and they all arrived like one on the back of another. So I kind of had 1 week I got revisions for one story, then the next week I got revisions for another story, and then the next week I got revisions for a third story. And so I had to get them all out, and I couldn't think about a possible rewrite.
Right. And working with traditional publishing, I have never handed in your manuscript that did not ask for revisions. Has that been your experience also?
I have had that happen one time.
You
I
have
had one.
you have
I
a
had,
unicorn story?
I had one story that came back clean. It had one note on it, which was just, "You refer to this here. Is this what you actually mean?"
Right.
Most makes me think
And-
they weren't
and-
paying attention or they
I-
weren't
I
doing their
know.
job. Like, what's wrong with them? Like-
It was very strange.
Yeah.
I certainly, that is not my expectation. There are times when I get notes back from a publisher and I'm like, why did you even buy this story? Like,
True.
like,
Yeah,
and
true.
and I still make the changes, and I still sort of make them within, my my concept of what it should be as the author. But like, and sometimes you have a right to say no, and if they don't want to go with that change. I had one note where someone thought that my younger narrator wouldn't use a certain word, and I'm like, well, he's a farm kid. He grew up around farmers. He would know
You would know that.
what
word,
that
yeah.
means,
Yeah.
Right.
because it was referencing furrows.
Right.
It's like he
Of course,
would
every
know what
farmer knows a
furrows
furrow, yeah.
are. And so I'm like, I'm willing to bend on everything else, but I'm sticking to my guns on this because I can't think of a better way to say it.
Yeah. And, dear listener, that's not being adversarial. It's important to note that if you get notes from a editor and you don't agree with all of them, you don't have to make all the changes. Most editors consider them to be largely suggestions as long as the shape changes in the right direction.
We've received notes from editors that we straight up they were trying to change the story in a way that we didn't agree with.
Yeah.
Like, I think they saw a different story than the one we were telling and was trying to put it in a different direction, and so we rejected 95% of the changes.
Yeah, and I've had to.
And sometimes it's enough to say my intention was this,
Right.
Yeah.
to the editor, and then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
Right.
well, to make that come through in the prose, you need to do this, this, and this.
Yeah, and that's a good thing to
And I bang the table.
to point out is that if the fundamental idea in your story got mislaid in the initial reading by that editor, it can be enough that you simply say, oh, this is what I really intended. And they go, oh, well, then at this early page, I would make this small change. And then all of those other notes don't matter because now I understand what you're trying to do. I thought it was this instead. Right. And so I was trying to realign it to what I thought it was. And so it's just people doing their best.
And, if you grew up on a Manitoba farm or around Manitoba farmers and you're writing a story about a kid who did the same,
Yeah.
and you have an editor who's not from here and did not have that experience,
Right.
you're going to get some notes potentially that need to be ignored or need to be explained.
Yeah.
And that's part of you need to have that creative confidence of saying, this was my intention. I believe this is the way forward.
So one of my favorite things to do if I get substantive notes, if I get edits, is I read all the ones that have question marks first.
As if I don't get what you're doing here, so you're
That's
trying.
right. So if it has a question mark, it might mean, like you said, did you mean this? Or is this connected to so-and-so? And if I find myself saying, yes, I did mean that. Yes, it is connected to that. Yes. Then I know the story reveals all of those answers. And I can look at, let's say there might be, just for easy math, you have 100 notes. If 30 of them have question marks and you read through all of them and you're like, yeah, the answer is yes to all of these, then you know that your story is going to answer all the questions. If you read if I read through all the question marks and go, oh, yeah, no, I didn't clarify that. Oops, no, for sure didn't. Then I know that my draft probably needs some real work before I even want to bother going into the other substantive notes, right? The question marks that are on those notes are where I start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's just also a way that it lessens the blow, if I've been working pretty carefully with my editor, then I think they understand the story to begin with, and it helps align that they really got it. It's not always the truth, but
I always start with the easy things. I cross as many of them off as I can, or anything that is a kind of accept wholesale or reject wholesale.
you like that.
I
Yeah.
like to clear that off, and then this is sort of where I come back.
Destroy all M dashes.
Yeah,
Adverbs must die. All of those things. Yeah.
This is where I come back. I'll print off the pages that need a larger revision. Just those pages in isolation.
You're good at isolating and like compartmentalizing those things.
Maybe it comes from, filling the creativity on the margins of the day job is that I have to compartmentalize it.
Yeah. I'm a strong proponent of filling the margins of your day with creative things. So I get that. Right now, it's like cycling projects. Certain things, if it has a deadline, then my margins are the ones, like you say, where you're on your own recognizance. I can just be creative on my own. Well, gentlemen, one thing that I really feel after this conversation is that I want to go cut some words out of a document. That's like literally once I close this off, I have a draft that I was tinkering with that I need to shave some words off. I'm going to figure out how many I need to lose, how many per page I need to lose. I'm going to try the Ginther method. What about you, Justin? What's on your agenda today?
I'm painting today.
Oh.
Painting a Gundam.
So you two are both footloose and fancy free today.
Well, no, I'm painting a Gundam. I have a lot to do. Robots have a lot of parts.
Oh my
And,
goodness.
I am finishing a draft on a story that I see from my notations. I last looked at August 5th, 2020.
Uh-oh.
I wrote one note to myself about whether I should start the story as I did, and then did nothing with it for 4 years.
For 4 years. So it's been fallow for a little while. There's some farming terms for you. This has been Super Pulp Science, where we talk about how a genre gets made. This is Gregory Kamichuk encouraging you to write stories and make comics.